This is Dan from Rambling Ambition, and we are sitting in our 2024 Sprinter Van 170 Extended all-wheel drive. If you've watched any of our videos to this point, we are in the process of building this van from a bare stripped cargo van into a fully functional camper van. And we are at the point right now where we have put all the exterior accessories on it that we want. We've got 700 watts of solar panel on the roof. We have an air conditioner, a max air fan. We just finished the floor in the back. I'll leave links to all of those videos down in the description below. Would appreciate it if you check them out if you're interested. But today we're going to talk about batteries. The cover is what I'm considering the four major things that you need to cover while you're thinking about the difference between an AGM and a lithium iron phosphate battery. So batteries in vans is a big topic because a lot of the reason why people are building these vans out are to be able to live away from society in a lot of ways. And so what that means is you have to have energy independence. And so your battery bank has to be sized to the amount of independence that you're looking for. When it comes to choosing the right battery, van owners face a multitude of challenges. One of the most important considerations is capacity. You need a battery that can provide enough power to meet your energy needs, but you also don't want it to be so big and heavy that it takes up too much space in your van. And there's the issue of cost. You want a battery that's going to provide you with the power that you need, but you also don't want it to break the bank at the same time. Building a van is very expensive, and you have to be very cost conscious as you're making selections and choices. On top of all these practical considerations, there's also a question of which battery type do you choose. Do you go the traditional lead acid or an AGM battery, or do you splurge on a lithium iron phosphate battery? Each type has its own pros and cons, and it's hard to know which one is right for you. So today what I like to cover is what I'm considering the four major things that you need to cover while you're thinking about the difference between an AGM and a lithium iron phosphate battery. So the first thing we want to talk about is depth of discharge. Depth of discharge means how far down can you draw that battery before you have a potential for causing damage. Now in an AGM battery, you can pull down the battery about 50% of its rated capacity before you start to damage the cells in the battery. By contrast, in a lithium iron phosphate battery, you can pull that battery down to about 95% of its rated charge before you have the potential for causing any damage to the cells. So what does that mean? So if we take an AGM battery that's got 100 amp hours in it, and we put on let's call it a series of lights that are pulling 5 amps an hour, that means that battery will power that light since we can only bring it down to 50%, that's 50 amp hours. That means that battery will only power that light for 10 hours. Because a lithium iron phosphate battery can pull down to about 95% of its rated capacity, with a 100 amp hour lithium iron phosphate battery, with the same lights pulling 5 amps, and we can pull it down to 95%, that means that same battery is going to be able to to power that light for almost 19 hours. So you're doubling your capacity to power your electronics by choosing lithium over AGM. So weight is a big deal in a van. We do everything we can to make them as light as possible, yet as functional as possible, because the more weight that you have, the more impact it has on your suspension, the more impact it has on your tire wear, the more impact it has on your fuel mileage, the more impact it has on the way the van handles and operates. So batteries are one of those things where we know that we're going to be adding weight because of their size. The difference between an AGM battery and a lithium ion battery that are of the same size is a lithium battery is going to weigh about half as much as your AGM battery. So if your AGM battery weighs about 82 pounds for a 100 amp hour battery, that same battery in a lithium state is going to weigh about 40 pounds. That's a massive savings when you talk about large battery bank systems where you have up to 600 to 800 amp hours of lithium power. That's a significant savings in weight. Now, the third step is lifespan. So an AGM battery has a typical lifespan of 3 to 5 years. By contrast, a lithium iron phosphate battery is going to last over 10 years. And that's just because It is designed to be able to be drawn down to basically nothing and charged back up on a regular basis. It's the chemistry behind it. So one of the huge benefits of lithium ion technology is the fact that that battery is going to last for 10 years. Most of you aren't going to keep the same camper for that long, so those batteries will outlast your camper van. With contrast with an AGM battery, depending on how deep you pull it down, and if you ever get below that 50% level, those batteries may only last a couple of years for you before you're having to disassemble a bunch of stuff to replace them. And lastly, cost. And this is where the big difference comes. So, you know, if we think about how long a battery will last, and we think about how much energy we can pull out of it, and we think about the weight, there are some clear advantages to the lithium iron phosphate battery over the AGM. In this last category, which is cost, lithium really takes a hit because a lithium battery is going to cost 2 to 3 to 4 times more than a typical AGM battery. So as an example, a typical 100 amp hour AGM battery is going to cost somewhere around $300, $325, depending on the brand that you buy. A similar sized 100 amp hour lithium iron phosphate battery is going to cost between $800 and $1,000, depending on which battery you get and which manufacturer you get it from. So with all those things together, I still think that given the advantages that a lithium iron phosphate battery gives you, it's well worth the investment to power your van, specifically because of the weight savings, because of the time that the battery is going to last. So your cost per amp hour is much less, even though the upfront cost is high. But really where it shines the most is in its available energy. Its usable energy is drastically different than the AGM batteries. And when you're in a van and you're trying to be off the trail and out away from all kinds of people, and you want to be experiencing nature and doing the things that you love, having the battery capacity to continue to run your 12-volt appliances and your 12-volt products and charge your laptops and all the other things, and then have an inverter that can power your AC loads like a coffee maker and a stove and those kind of things, an induction stove. You know, AGM just doesn't have the capacity to do that in a way that gives you the freedom that you're looking for. Now, we didn't talk about brands at all because I think that research is going to allow you to kind of find what brands are out there. There's Battleborn, which is very heavily used in the van industry. There's Lion Energy that provides a really good battery in a nice small form factor. You have Dakota Lithium and Renogy, and then you have all of the Chinese lithium iron phosphate batteries you can think about buying on Amazon. There are some other companies that are out there. SOK makes a great battery as well. All those come in different sizes and different shapes and at different price points, and you just have to kind of do your own research on which battery you think is going to be the best for you. Now, if you're interested in some really good reviews on how the lithium iron phosphate batteries go together and how they draw down and how they perform, Will Prouse is, I think, one of the best folks out there. I'll leave a link in the description to his channel. I'm not affiliated with it, but a lot of my research on which battery to buy for our van really came from him, and taking a listen to how he explains what the battery is supposed to do versus what the battery claims to do. He usually takes them apart and goes through their construction. So if that's something you're interested in, I suggest you check him out. So when we made the decision for the batteries that we were going to use in our van, we looked at cost as a factor. We looked at weight as a factor. We looked at battery capacity as a factor, and we looked at its discharge capacity. So each of the batteries have a little different capacity range, and they have some different elements. Because we're up in northern Colorado, and we plan on using the van during the wintertime, the other element that we talked about and looked at and thought about was to buy a battery that had a self-heated element to it. So there are a couple manufacturers that will provide a battery that is self-heating, which means that when it gets to a certain temperature level, there's a small discharge pad that heats the cells to keep them to be able to discharge like they're supposed to, but also, and more importantly, so that you can charge them. because a lot of the lithium iron phosphate batteries that have an internal battery management system do have, or a low temperature cutoff, should I say, to keep from damaging the battery. So if you're going to be in cold temperatures, think about a battery that may be self-heating. In the end, the right battery for you will depend on the specific needs and budget. But if you're looking for the best overall option, I highly recommend going with a lithium iron phosphate battery. That's it for today's video on finding the best battery for your van. If you're new to van life, I hope this video has been informative and helpful. Don't forget to leave your thoughts in the comments below. Let me know what kind of battery system you're using and why you picked it. If you're looking for more van life essentials, be sure to check out some of our other videos. We got a lot more to come in this van build. Thanks for watching. I appreciate it if you've made it this far. Give yourself a thumbs up, and we'll talk. This is Dan from Ramblin' Ambition, and we'll talk to you next time.